ay kasalukuyan hong pinag-aaralan na rin. So we expect po on or before March 15 po, yung mga rota po ay mapag-aralan at mapagsan na rin po.
An employers group anticipates transportation woes as employees start returning on-site for work.
Yung mass transportation in the traffic is a turn-off, which makes employees traveling time too long. But very few companies, especially the small ones, cannot afford shuttling their employees. So the government has to do something about this.
More and more people are now visiting malls as most of the country has eased to alert level 1.
Dumami po talaga ang ating mga customers na may kasamang bata. Karamihan po ng customers namin are families. So parents with their kids, even on weekends, even on weekdays, dumami na rin po.
But despite the rising number of people going to the mall, the management assured that everyone's safety remains their top priority.
Despite the full vaccination of 63 million Filipinos, health authorities say the coverage is still too low to protect the population against future COVID-19 surges. How should government maintain public health safety under the lowest pandemic restrictions? We discuss in this episode of the Chiefs. It's a packed episode tonight. In a short bit, the DILG and of course the DOH will talk to us about our shift to the most loose pandemic restrictions we've seen so far. Then later, we will discuss the renewed buzz surrounding nuclear energy after President Duterte signed an executive order some say is a step towards a nuclear-powered Philippines. We will be joined by the other chiefs when we return. Welcome to the Chiefs. I'm Robbie Alampay. With us online, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, Nucci Cruz Valdez of News 5, and later on Ed Lingao of One News will join us here in the studio. Chiefs, good evening.
Good evening.
Ami, anong binabantayan natin?
Well, meron ng bumagsak na city sa Ukraine, unfortunately. Pero kinondemn naman, well, it was not a condemnation, but deploring the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. That's unusual for the UN General Assembly, ang bilis-bilis emergency session. So tingnan natin kung ano mag-epekto nun.
Oo, at saka it's almost unanimous, di ba? Pagka nung nakita ko yung vote, I think, was that 5 countries, kasama na Russia doon, who voted against it?
Yes, North Korea, Belarus,
Syria.
well, mga largely karaya na rin. Ano? So,
well, that's expected naman, no? Mga kakampi ng Russia. China abstained, diba? And, so, well, wala, ang hirap pigilan yan because Russia is a permanent member of the Security Council. So, may veto power yan. I mean, kahit na ano pa maisip nilang gawin dyan, i-veto lang naman ng Russia yan.
And that's exactly what happened, di ba? Veto sa Security Council, which is why they brought on the General Assembly. But even at the General Assembly, it is still a non-binding statement.
Wala It's non-binding.
Yung city nga yun na yun, malapit sa Odessa. They're trying to cut off Ukraine from these events, no? Kaya na natin, abangan pa.
And that's the other side of the story, that we are monitoring how all of that that financial and economic sanctions are going to bite sa Russia. Bumabagsak ang ruble and inflation is going through the roof. In any case, we will have to devote another episode to that. For now, we'll talk about what's happening in the Philippines, particularly as we loosen restrictions. Joining us, Undersecretary Ipamako Densing of the Department of Interior and Local Government, Yusek Densing. Welcome again to the Chiefs.
Hi, Robbie, Ami, Luchi, and to all your followers of the program. Magandang gabi po.
Ang laki po ng ngiti nyo. Kamusta po ba ang rollout natin ng Alert Level 1? So far, so good?
Well, so far so good. I've been moving around since March 1. Actually, since February 28, because it's preparatory to March 1. And as early as February 28, people was already moving as if it's already Alert 1 as early as February 28. So I would think close to 90% of the pre-pandemic movement has returned. No? In fact, even traffic has started to build up even at the Skyway. So we're talking about pre-pandemic activities happening right now.
But that's one way of putting it, di ba? Na, ganito na, sanay na tayo ng ano. Pero nakakasanayan ng mga tao ngayon yung gulo eh. Even yung mga namamasahe and namamasada, you mentioned the traffic and also not enough rides. Yesterday, si Ed, binabanggit niya nga na on the one hand, 100% capacity yung mga units, but at the same time, LTFRB is only rolling out 50% of what's actually available and ready. Kamusta po yung transport in particular? Let's start with that. Ano pong namamonitor niyo sa traffic?
Well, MRT and LRT punuan na rin, no? Ably describing it, medyo nagdidikita na rin yung tao sa loob ng MRT and LRT. But the better feedback that I got was that despite the fact na ganun yung sitwasyon, they were all wearing face masks and there was really no talking inside, no? Generally, unlike before na marami nagchichismisan, no? So puno na yung transport. Buses are also filled up with people standing up, but I would think that would be 90% or 95%. Prior to that, talagang dikitan yung tao sa loob ng bus. So these are the observations we've seen at least for the past 3-4 days.
Ang medyo magulo yata ngayon, may misunderstanding na wala ng restrictions, yun ang problema. Kaya yung PNP, nag-report sila, they have apprehended people or accosted people, at yung marami ring na-fine for not wearing mask, saka hindi yata nagdi-distancing. Ano bang dapat i-clarify doon?
Actually, sa Alert Level 1, ably describes Alert Level System 1 is really wearing of the face mask, no? That's number one. Yung social distancing is no longer being emphasized right now. But of course, the continuous washing of hands. Kailangan malinis yung ating mga katawan at kamay. Pangalawa is, ang babantayan lang talaga natin is yung pagpasok sa mga 3Cs area, no? Where we still confirm that anybody who wants to enter a 3Cs area like a dine-in, restaurant, cinemas, amusement parks, people must be fully vaccinated. So ang critical foundation of all these Alert Level 1 status is really being vaccinated if you want to access all areas, no, including 3Cs areas, including dining.
So
But do you think?
Yeah, they have to ask for vaccination cards. Yung mga
correct.
Mm-hmm.
Sa pagpasok sa malls, they will not be asked to show a vaccination card. But once they enter a 3C area, like a cinema, amusement, kids area, and restaurants inside the malls, kailangan nila magpakita ng vax card.
Okay, pero ngayon na nagluluwag na, do you think there's a danger that people will say, well, maluwag na naman, hindi na kailangan magpabakuna. Okay naman ako, hindi naman ako kailangan kumain sa mga restaurant na yan. How is the vaccination scenario looking right now that people are, let's just say, more confident, whether you admit it or not, no?
Well, you're right there, Luchi. In our observation, many of our kababayans have stopped having themselves vaccinated. That's why our directives to the barangays and the local government units is really to go house to house, no? Specifically to para makita itong mga senior citizens who are the most vulnerable. Number two, even the boosters, no? While we are pushing and moving for everybody to understand that a booster is needed after more than 3 months of being fully vaccinated, there seems to be a slowdown of people being boosted, no, by the vaccines. So this is the challenge that we are encountering right now, and we hope that the people will understand that vaccination is still important in this whole process of the new normal.
Are we going to encourage back to work, return to work for companies? Yan ang hinihingi ngayon ni Presidential Advisor Joey Concepcion. No? He's saying that until and unless the full population of people outside of their homes, as it was before the pandemic, no, unless those people return to work or return to school and start being mobile, the economy will not get back as quickly as it ought to. What do you think of his suggestions?
Well, number one, at least for the government, based on Administrative Order 96, if it's already Alert 1, we have to go back to our offices at 100% capacity. Except for those vulnerable individuals like pregnant women, senior citizens, who may opt to be on work from home mode, no? But we're actually encouraging not encouraged, but we are now directed to go back to our office 100%. For the private sector, this is something ideal that we want to happen right now, that at least 90% of all private sector employees should return to work.
May numbers na ba kayo ngayon? I mean, would you have any idea as to how many private companies have actually begun requiring 100% return to work? Do you have any idea?
Yeah. For the large companies, in one of our discussions with the private sector, they're going to build up people going to their work. In other words, from March 1, I would think that they're going to have a schedule or plan of people slowly going back to work. Most probably starting at 80%, 85, 90, going to 100%. If we continue in this level of low risk or minimal risk, specifically here in the National Capital Region. So there's that build-up of people going back to work.
What about students? Kasi malaking population din yun. Lalo na sa mga MSMEs, di ba? Because students dine, they have lunch or snacks in MSME level restaurants, no, or dine-ins. Are we encouraging a return to face-to-face schooling soon?
Under Alert Level 1, Luchi, face-to-face is really allowed right now, no? But again, as I've mentioned a while ago, it's not 100% immediately. They're doing some schedules, they're planning. Right now, it's hybrid, no? I think 50% of the time students are allowed to do face-to-face. 50% of the time they're at home doing school or work, school for work at home, no, school at home. So it's really a build-up, and what we need to do is really to sustain the minimal and low-risk classification of the Level 1 or Alert Level 1 local government school areas, especially the National Capital Region. And again, during the discussions of the IETF, much of the discussion is really moving back towards or bias in favor of returning the vibrance of our economy. In the last report, our GDP in 2021 is back to pre-pandemic levels. Had it not for pre-pandemic, our GDP right now is around 19.2 trillion, should have been around 23 trillion today. But of course, this was stumped because of the pandemic. So we're just back to 2019 levels, and the focus of right now, or the bias of our ITF right now, is really to open up the economy.
Sir, linawin ko lang po yung nabanggit nyo kanina na on the government sector and the public sector side, required na, no? Mandated na that 100%. That applies, national as well as local governments, or do local governments still have that prerogative of managing their own human resource?
Well, right now, whether it's national or local, and under Alert Level 1, they're supposed to be back to 100% capacity in their respective offices, again, whether national or local. But however, we are given a little leeway to make a build-up, and of course, identifying vulnerable individuals still to be put under an alternative work mode program.
Okay. What about sa tourism? Is there a standard, are there standard mechanisms and protocols now in travel, in particular between and among different regions and provinces?
Well, right now it's really open. No? I remember I just issued an advisory to all local governments that to no longer require documents such as health clearance, RT-PCR test. Most probably a Vax card will do. That's number one. Number two, if they are coming from an area which is a higher alert level classification, say alert level 2 to alert level 1, then that's the only time they can require an extra document if they deem to do so. But right now, the only thing that we're asking them to do is really just make sure that the proper facilities are present in all tourist destination areas in case certain individuals would turn up to be positive for COVID.
Yung vaccination campaign nyo, yung house to house, kasama ba dun yung boosters? Saka anong gagawin nyo kapag ayaw ng tao? Anong gagawin nyo?
Opo, yung house to house, una sa lahat, hinahanap po namin kasi yung mga A2, yung ating senior citizens, that's primary na hinahanap. Pangalawa, pag nag-house to house, kinakampaign na rin namin ang boosters. And of course, hindi naman natin sila nire-report. Pag ayaw pa nila magpa-boosters, then wala ko tayong magagawa. But at least we know who are these people, and on a continuous basis, we will still convince them to get themselves boosted with the vaccine.
May binabalak ba kayong mga program? Kapareho dati, may mga incentive with the private sector para magpa-vaccinate mga tao. Sa ngayon, para matapos yan, kasi lahat ng health professionals, yan ang sinasabi, hindi pa tayo tapos sa vaccination, bakit ganito na tayo? Are you planning any programs to encourage people to get fully vaccinated and boosted?
Well, right now we're looking at another national vaccination day or days, which is part 4. No? That's number 1. Number 2, continues ating strategic communications down the level of the barangay. We do a lot of town hall meetings to convince our fellow Filipinos in the barangay level to have themselves boosted and vaccinated. So again, that's the biggest challenge right now. We've been aggressive in the last 2 months, ending 2021, having 12 million new vaccinees, no? But when came January, February, medyo bumabagal na po yung ating pagbabakuna. In fact, ang fully vaccinated jumped by 5% only in the last 45 days, which is quite slow, no? Unlike in the past where our jump in vaccination rates is almost double or double digits.
Nabanggit niyo po kanina ang...
Wala na kayong no? Parang the sense is, all of a sudden, di naman but you seem to be throwing caution to the wind suddenly, no? Does this mean that you're very confident that there will not be any surge? Kasi parang na kayo ngayon parang go 100%, let's do it. Despite the fact that only 63 million have been vaccinated, really, when you think about it, right? And even the DOH is saying that we're not yet in the endemic stage of COVID. Is it safe to say that your confidence level is so high that you're pretty sure that no surge is going to occur?
No.
In the near
We're
future?
still very, very cautious. In fact, in our messaging, we're still telling the people or everybody that we are still under public health. Of course, the overall objective is hopefully there should be a declaration of endemicity moving forward. But as of today, we're still very cautious. The messaging is still we are still under a pandemic. It's just we are loosening up on certain areas in the economy. That's why the messaging is the minimum public health standard should always be there. Wearing of face mask, of course, making sure that everybody is vaccinated. So we're still very cautious. But while we're confident that in areas where there is a so-called herd immunity, because more than 70% of the target population has been fully vaccinated, and 80% of the vulnerable sectors, specifically the senior citizens, have also been vaccinated, more or less we're confident in that area that we will be able to address certain surges if it happens. But of course, we always hope that it doesn't. And again, we're throwing caution to everybody despite the fact that we're under alert level 1.
Sir, nabanggit niyo po kanina ang Vax card, no? That in many instances, pwede na yung Vax card. Alam niyo naman po, pet issue natin yan. Pag tuwing pinag-uusapan natin dito, particularly yung QR code and the interoperability of data. Kumustahin ko lang po, yung VaxCert PH, kumusta po ang uptake doon? Both in terms of people trying to get their own QR codes with VaxCert PH and LGUs adopting interoperability with VaxCert.
Yung sa VaxCert PH, the last feedback I got that they've been doing 70 to 80%. No?
Of LGUs.
The primary issue really is the inputting of data from our VAC centers in the local government units. Sometimes there are errors of entry, and this is the reason why our Filipinos or fellow Filipinos who are trying to generate a VAC certificate for themselves are not able to generate for them. No? But at least 70 to 80%, we're sure that their names are in the system. So this is something that we're still trying to address right now, and the DILG is really coordinating with the DIC.
So when you say 70 to 80%, these are 70 to 80% of people who are vaccinated are now in the system of VaxCert.
Yes, that they can generate their VaxCert if they want to.
And in the meantime, 100% of LGUs will respect the VaxCert?
Yes, definitely. In fact, our VAX certificate is now recognized internationally. This is bilateral recognition of certificates with other countries.
Yusek, ang common attitude kasi dito kapag walang enforce ng rules, mahina ang compliance. So, para lang ma-promote ang compliance, ano ba yung fine kapag na-apprehend ka for not wearing a mask in public places, for example?
Well, many of our, if not all of our local government units have already ordinances for the compliance of the minimum public health standards. Kasama na doon is wearing of the face mask. So kung ikaw ay lumabas at hindi ka nakasuot ng face mask, makita ka ng ating mga enforcers, barangays and police, you will be apprehended and you will be fined. So nandun pa rin tayo, hindi pa naman nawawala yan, and the ordinances are still there.
Magkano yun? Magkano?
Iba-iba po. Sa LGU may 500, may 1,000, merong community work.
Anong mga areas po ang nag-quid daw pa tayo? Halimbawa, I know that yung airport, halimbawa, they're still trying to keep the number of passengers or I think outbound passengers to 10,000 at any given time, no? Instead of the 40, which it was before the COVID. What other areas do you believe or have you talked about that you have pinpointed to be, areas where we ought to tread a little more, lightly or slowly?
Well, right now we're just playing it by ear. No, we're not pushing for anything as long as it's demand of the market, so to speak. We will go there. So if there's a demand later on for more travels in the domestically, then there will be a slow increase in the number of transport facilities to be able to do that. So we're playing by ear. Walang pilitan, but once the demand is there and it picks up, then the transport sector may have to open up more flights or more movements of their transportation facilities. So it's playing by ear. Wala namang dinidiktahan about it.
Okay. Yung campaigns, wala na rin. I mean, pwede nang the usual campaign except that they're wearing masks. Ganun ba yun? Walang bagong protocols or loosened protocols at least for...
Yeah, we're still following the COMELEC Resolution 10732. And bawat region, of course, nationally, there is a national COMELEC campaign committee, bawat regions, bawat municipality. So we go there, no? And we impose what is under 10732, which is a much stricter movement for for people who are campaigning. For example, sa alert level 1, we're not allowing organizers to put 100% of the people in gyms for purposes of campaign, 70% lang. So medyo may
Okay.
caution yung
So
732.
yan, meron.
And at that point, most probably doon kami maghihigpit in the campaign areas.
Okay.
Alright.
Yusek Densing, maraming
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
That was,
Good evening.
good evening po. DILG Undersecretary Epemaco Densing. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs on One News, and now joining us is Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere of the Department of Health. Yusek, good evening and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good
Good
evening po.
evening, Yusek.
Magandang gabi po. Good evening po to all of you.
Thank you for joining us po again. Ma'am, ito nga, day 3 of Alert Level 1, medyo a bit of concern ng maraming tao dun sa crowding, dun sa mga public terminals, buses, jeepneys, and all that. Doesn't it alarm you, the DOH? And this is only day 3.
Yes sir, no? So it's kind of worrisome. Kami po ay nagbibigay na po ng mga abiso at saka ng pakikipag-usap sa ibang ahensya. Dahil nakita ho natin, binigyan natin ng 100% capacity, no restrictions. But we have observed that they went beyond 100%. Kaya nakikiusap tayo dun sa mga operators na dapat 100% lang, wag nang sumobra pa sa 100%. Ang mga bus, may mga nakatayo, punong-puno. Ang LRT, ang MRT, punong-puno rin po kahit sa platform pa lang. So we ask our enforcers, our local governments, DOTR, DILG, sana po magawa natin ng solusyon ito so that we don't have super spreader events in the coming days.
Ma'am, kasi tingin ng tingin ng mga Pilipino diyan sa 100%, it's 100% of what used to be the situation before the pandemic, which is standing room only. Yun ang 100% capacity.
Tama nga po yun. So, nag-alert level 1 po tayo. Sabi natin, wala tayong mga capacity restrictions na. Pero kailangan tumupad tayo doon sa kaning pinag-usapan. So, if it's 100%, it's not 120, 150%. So, sana po maipatupad nga po ng maayos para po mawalan tayo ng ganitong pangamba na maaring tumaas ang kaso sa mga darating na araw.
Yusek, yan nga rin po yung panawagan, as you pointed out, sa mga ahensya natin, sa mga police, local governments, and so on. That's in terms of enforcement. But I want to ask you your impression of yung attitude ng mga Pilipino ngayon. Kanina, kausap namin si DILG Undersecretary Pimaco Densing. Sabi niya, notwithstanding all of this and binabawasan ng restrictions, consistent pa rin, ang message pa rin sa lahat, emergency pa rin to, urgent pa rin to, kailangan pa rin mag-ingat. And it seems really very dissonant from what we're seeing at ground level. Are you confident that Filipinos still have that mindset that we are still in a health emergency?
Well, kailangan lang paalala siguro araw-araw. Minsan kasi talagang pag lumabas tayo or now that we are in alert level 1, yun pong bugso ng damdamin natin na ang tagal nating naka-restrict, ang tagal nating hindi napuntahan ng mga pwesto, siguro na andun talaga ang ating mga kababayan. Pero ito pong pang-araw-araw natin na paalala na nandito pa rin yung virus. A lot of people are getting complacent because they say that they are vaccinated, because they say that they have the natural immunity, because they say na wala nang masyadong kaso. Pero kailangan maintindihan natin lahat, hindi po mawawala ang virus soon. Ito po ay mamumuhay na kasama natin. So kailangan yung safeguards po natin, ipapatupad pa rin natin.
Yusek, nagko-coordinate din ba kayo sa simbahan? Kasi as we saw on Ash Wednesday, maraming simbahan yung punong-puno talaga eh. Pila-pila dun sa yung daubing of the ash nga. Nagko-coordinate din ba kayo sa kanila? Kasi tuloy-tuloy yan eh. It's just the start of the Lenten season at marami pang ganyang mga schedules na na magkakapunuan yan.
Yes, ma'am. We have a direct line naman with our churches, with the CBCP. Actually, they help us in different activities for this response. Ang hinihilingan natin, local governments po sana tulungan tayo maipatupad natin ito pong mga protocols natin kasi kung lahat po may crowding na sa simbahan, sa transportation, sa mga campaign sorties, well, we are not really certain pero syempre na andyan lagi yung mataas na risk na pwede tayo magkaroon ng pagtaas uli ng kaso.
Pero Yusek, the fact that you will be also shifting to weekly reporting of COVID cases gives off a vibe that everything is really now so much better and there's no sense of urgency as much as there used to be. How do you balance that perception that, wala nang sense of urgency, but at the same time, telling them na, hey, pwede pa yan bumalik, or, how big is the fear as opposed to, the real situation on the COVID?
Yes, ma'am. No? So first, it's not really removing that sense of urgency. It's not really saying na wala na tayong dapat ipangamba because wala na tayong pinapakitang numero. Ang sa atin lang po, we'd like to shift that mindset of people because we know that we are going to live with this virus and we have to live with this virus. So kailangan yung mindset po natin, ma-shift yung focus doon po sa mga severe and critical at saka doon sa nakaka-occupy ng ICUs natin. Because if we are going to live with the virus, yung mga mild na cases natin, asymptomatic na mga kaso, iyan po dapat ay parang parte na ng buhay natin. It's part of transitioning into this endemic state. Kasi sa endemic state po, katanggap-tanggap na para sa society ang ganito mga kaso, ang numero, no? Not now, but sooner when cases are manageable already. And what should be the focus of everybody should be the consequences that we care about. Ayaw natin na may namamatay, ayaw natin na may naglulubha, ayaw natin na pupuno po ang ating mga ospital, especially the ICU. That's why we are shifting this so that there would be a sense of normalcy among our population.
So kunyari lang Yusek, in this situation, kunyari nagkalagnat ako today, what should my mindset be? Should I immediately assume still that this could be a COVID symptom? And you know, should I now I don't know, isolate immediately? Should I take an antigen test? What should we do on an individual level when we do experience symptoms that may or may not be COVID?
Yes. In the alert level system, in alert level 1, hindi natin sinabing tatanggalin na natin ang safeguards natin. In alert level 1, hindi natin sinabing nawala yung virus. In alert level 1, hindi natin sinabing milder at safe na tayo dyan sa virus na yan. Meron pa rin po. So kung ano man po yung ginagawa natin dati, halimbawa nagkakasimptomas tayo, still isolate immediately because the virus is still here. Meron pa rin pong mga nagiging kaso, although mababa, pero marami pa rin pong may sakit. Sa buong Pilipinas, ang active cases pa rin natin, 50,000. 50,000 pa rin ang active cases sa Philippines. So the virus is still here. So anytime that you would still feel or you would experience COVID-19 symptoms, the best thing to do pa rin po is to isolate, call your LGUs. If you need to get tested, you get tested.
Okay. Yusek, we only have time for one more question. The other day, nagulat ako, nga pala, March na nga pala, no? Some people started getting their boosters in December. Some people started getting, either way, you're either 1/3 or 1/2 of the way into what people presume would be another 6 months. At this point, what does the data and the latest findings suggest? Should we start psyching ourselves for another round of boosters?
Well, there are evidences right now and studies that had been coming out in these recent days kung saan the studies are saying that it is needed for those immunocompromised individuals, the 4th dose. So ito po ay pinag-aaralan pa rin ng ating mga eksperto, but for the rest of the population, hindi pa ho nire-recommenda dyan sa mga pag-aaral na yan. Ang nakalagay pa lang dyan, nakasaad yung immunocompromised at saka mga senior citizens. So kapag may lumalabas po mga ganitong ebidensya, pinag-aaralan maigi po ito ng ating mga eksperto together with DOH para makita natin kung kailangan nating tahakin, no, itong ganitong klaseng intervention at anong gagawin natin with the rest of the population while they wait, no, kung kailangan din nila in the coming months. But just to say, we are ready for the 4th doses, no, doon sa mga commitments and negotiations po natin, nakalaan na po yung budget natin for this kind of additional doses for our population.
Okay, Yusek Vergere, maraming salamat po.
Thank you,
Yusek.
Salamat po. Thank you po.
Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere. And we shift topics now. Now joining us is Dr. Carlo Arcilla, Director of the Philippine Nuclear Research Institute. Dr. Arcilla, welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening, Dr. Arcilla.
Welcome back.
Of course, we invited Dr. Arcilla because President Duterte has just signed an executive order for the development of facilities for nuclear power, basically making it a direction and a policy. But I want to ask you, Dr. Arcilla, before we get into the technical matters of nuclear power in the Philippines, the EO itself, it is just an executive order. Does that necessarily signal a stable policy environment for us and a stable direction for nuclear power?
All right. First, it's an executive order, so it means it can be rescinded by the next president. But the important thing here of the EO is this. First, what is a national position? A national position is part of what we call the IAEA milestones. Any country who wants to go nuclear should take advantage of the combined best practices developed in the past 50 years of nuclear energy, compiled by the IAEA. And the first milestones that they recommend is a national policy. And that is exactly what the EO is. It is just the gate. So the gate says the Philippines is considering nuclear, but then you have to contend with the 18 milestones. Primarily, most of them are directed to safety. So there's still going to be a long or a series of steps, but without the EO, everything is theoretical.
Yeah,
so that's why it's a very significant step.
It's a significant step, but it can still go off in a different direction. I mean, particularly, I want to ask, after that, you will still need a law. Di ba? I mean, this will still have to go through Congress?
Yes and no, okay? For example, if, let's say, the theoretical question is the Bataan nuclear power plant is like, it's ready. Can we license it tomorrow? The licensor, I mean, the regulator is us. In particular, I mean, in my person, I will assign the license to open it. What is my basis? It's 5207, the Republic Act, which was the basis for constructing it in the first place. It has not been repealed yet. Okay?
Okay.
But there are pending laws in Congress that are important. Number one of which is the PNRI now, where the regulators should be independent. We're not independent because after the BNPP was closed by the Korea administration, she placed the PNRI under the DOST. Before, kasi PAEC ang tawag niyan, Philippine Atomic Energy Commission, so it is independent. You know, but even the PNRI, we still have things to improve. For example, we promote nuclear, but then we also regulate. And it's not good to have the same functions in the same body. So they have to be separated. And there's a bill in Congress to separate that. Then second, for example, ownership. Who will own nuclear plants? Government, private sector? How will it affect IPIRA? So there will be laws affected by this. So as I said, so there will be legislative challenges that have to be ironed out as we move forward.
Okay, what about the technical challenges? Kasi the biggest fear has always been we are along, well, of course, Japan is in the same situation now, but we are in the Pacific Ring of Fire. We are vulnerable to earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and we saw what happened to Fukushima, no? How do you address those fears? Kung sakasakali man, mukhang it's a long way before we can start any power plant, a nuclear power plant, but how do you address those fears? Kung sakasakali.
Thank you, ma'am, for that excellent question. Okay, Japan has 55 nuclear power plants. Okay, but America also has nuclear plants, and they are part of America is on the Ring of Fire. Yeah. So they have California, for example, has the San Andreas Fault, and there are nuclear power plants there. So it's not only us; it's them. America has 100 nuclear power plants, 90 maybe 95 now, and their nuclear power plants have an average age of 60 years, and they're being given additional licenses for another 20 years. So they will be running for 80 years. A coal plant is only 25, 30 years. So how do we contend with it? Actually, we can learn from Japan. Japan has 55 nuclear power plants. And let's examine Fukushima. Bakit po importante sa Fukushima? Out of the 55 nuclear power plants, Fukushima was the oldest nuclear plant. But Fukushima was built way before the BNPP. The seismic rating of Fukushima...
Really?
Oh, yeah. Matanda pa by a lot. The rating is only 0.15 G, whereas BNPP is 0.4. So it's 3 times, BNPP is 3 times as strong as the Fukushima. Now, there was a magnitude 9 earthquake that happened in Fukushima.
Yes.
We have never had a magnitude 9 earthquake in the Philippines. And the simple geologic reason for this is this. The faults in the Philippines are segmented. Hindi po siya tuloy-tuloy. Whereas in Japan, yung Japan trends, it's really one long. So the length of
You're saying that will never happen to us? Magnitude 9?
Likely not. Because after a long series of earthquakes, wala pang nangyayari. If it would have happened, it would have happened already. So anyway.
Yeah. Actually, Doc Garcia, it's the BNPP that's the cause of the national trauma toward nuclear plants. No, it's gained. Well, I don't know if it was demonized because of the political history of the BNPP. But how can you assure Filipinos in general that we have the competence to actually not just build but maintain, and more to the point, make sure that the nuclear power plant will be safely handled.
Right. So, no, and to answer your question, I have to
Sorry, yeah.
Amy's question. So, what I'm saying is that the earthquake in Japan did not destroy the plant. What had happened is that after the plant, the earthquake, you stop the operations, but then you have to pull off the reactor, and to do that, you need diesel engines. The diesel engines of Fukushima were in the basement. Now comes tsunami, na-flood sa basement. So wala kang pang cool off ng reactor, nagkaroon ka ng meltdown, and you generated hydrogen because there's a lot of water, and you produce hydrogen. It was the hydrogen that exploded. It was not a nuclear explosion. Now, there were 4 other nuclear plants sa Fukushima at a higher elevation. Nothing happened to them. And the 450 nuclear plants in the existence in the world today did the Fukushima stress test kasi we know exactly why it happened. That is what, for example, ang BNPP po na, now going back to your BNPP question, the BNPP is located 18 meters in elevation than sea level. The tsunami is only 15 meters. Okay? And if we're going to reopen BNPP, we will apply all the lessons learned. Now, question niyo po, how can we make sure it's demonized? Yeah. I mean, there is a series now on Rappler by Kelvin Rodolfo. He's attacking me even personally, lifelessly actually. I haven't responded to it. Kasi sabi nila, it's built down on a fault and it's built on a volcano. That were the reasons given by many people that makes the Bataan unsafe. To prove this, I've done my own studies, but I will leave it to PVOX to do that because they are the volcano and the fault experts. Now, can we operate it safely? How do we do that? Bataan nuclear power plant has 3 sisters, one in South Korea, another in Slovenia, and another in Brazil, built more or less same time, running for 40 years. And these 3 plants have operated safely and profitably. In fact, in South Korea, in 6 years, they recovered investment. Nanganak na yung kanilang nuclear plant na isa, 23 na ngayon sa South Korea. We started the nuclear program almost at the same time. Their power rates are half than us. And South Korea, less than 10 years ago, offered to rehabilitate the BNPP at the cost of $1 billion, which is the cost of a coal plant for the same output. Inupuan lang yung proposal, hindi ko po alam kung bakit. Pero sila, may experience sila. In fact, sabi nga, sa kakukuhan ng mga tao, nandun sa Korea, we can train them. Now, another thing, I'm always asked, di mo nga mapaandar yung tren mo, mag-ambisyon ka ng nuclear power plant, no? Ang sagot ko po dyan, boss, sumasakay ka ba ng eroplano? Kasi an airplane is more complicated than a nuclear power plant. Who operates our planes? They're Filipino engineers. South Korea built 3 brand new nuclear power plants in the UAE. UAE is an oil-rich country. Many Filipino engineers were involved there. So, to me, I almost consider it an insult na hindi natin kayang patakbuhin ang gumawa nuclear plant. Our engineers are fantastic. Ang problema na are politicians, ha? Yan ang disasters talaga natin. Yes, hindi naman lahat, pero yun talaga.
Sir, kambi lang ako, sir. Sir, yes, sir. I understand, sir. Sir, kambi lang ako, sir. Pero why an EO now, 3 months before the president's term expires? I mean, the last time we talked with you was in January 2020, almost exactly 2 years ago, and you had excellent arguments for reopening the nuclear power plant. In fact, you were reminding us, you were telling us then na you already drafted the EO. I suppose it's the same EO that the president signed. But still, it comes 3 months before his term expires. So parang, ba't hinabol na lang, hindi pa ginawang mas maaga para may nagawa siya?
Actually, baka mapahamak ako pag sinagot ko yan eh.
Sige na.
Sir, tayong libre naman dito eh.
Ganito lang. Kasi we drafted it. By the way, when it was drafted, it was whole government. I don't have to repeat it. I am proud of what we did. It was the best minds that went into that. And Now, I was wondering myself, bakit ang tagal? In fact, you know, in our last Atomic Energy Week celebration, I was quoted in the media. I mean, Mr. President, para mo na pirmahan nyo na yan kasi yan ang simula. You will leave an outstanding legacy, and he has done that. Okay? May factors kasi na nag-ano yan, nag-delay niyan. For example, you know, our DOS Secretary is now in the US to flaunt an MOU with the US. So parang tiniming, no? But I can assure you that the content is very similar, and it is written in better prose than what we composed. Okay. And it doesn't really matter because in that 3 months, what happens is that this current administration cannot do much, but they have already opened the gates. Yeah. And for that, I'm grateful. Sinabi din niya ni Yusek Arguisa, I think in a press conference today. So that is the most important thing. At saka, you know, I really combed through the document. Kasi, you know, there are problems now with the energy situation. I don't have to deal on it. Some of you have been sued because of it, right? And I don't have to do it. But what I'm saying is that with respect to the nuclear, that influence, at least in the document, or the perceived is not there. So, you know, which means that what we wanted put in there is there, the safeguard. And very important to say this is this. We are following the IAEA guidelines. We're not doing this out of the blue. Hindi tayo, you know, that is why it's very important. And even the IAEA head has actually tweeted today that we are congratulating the Philippines following the IAEA guidelines. I am now the regulator. I can promise you, I will never sign something. For example, sabihin ko, buksan BNPP. Wala pang studies, boss. Hindi mo ako pilitin. You find someone else to sign it for you. And
sir,
add something.
Yes, sir. Sir, if you don't mind, sir, let's try to boil it down into very, very practical terms, in pesos and cents. Mag-comparatives tayo. If you have a nuclear power plant versus a coal-fired power plant, what does it mean in terms of costs? What does it mean in terms of
renewables also, for that matter?
All right, let's do that. Kasi the fastest way to go nuclear is to reopen the BNPP. Okay, let's see. If you reopen the BNPP, what will the fuel cost? The fuel will cost something like $20 million to start it. And that fuel will fit inside a jeepney. Ganyan kaliit. That fuel will last for 18 months.
A year and a half, okay.
Yeah, may cost na kayo dyan. If that were a coal plant, same output, 620 megawatts for 18 months. The coal that you will need will 50 Panamax ships. These are 50,000 ton ships, 50 of them. When we estimated the cost 2 years ago, it was $600 million. Tumaas na ang presyo ngayon ng coal. That's now close to $1 billion. Not counting the CO2 that it will emit. So you're saving the Filipino overseas workers accumulated dollar reserves. 20 million versus 600 or $1 billion for the fuel. Yun na lang po ang pag-isipan natin. At saka may offer na si South Korea. Diyan, si South Korea is not stupid to actually offer like this, and they have the credibility.
Yes, sir. Sir, sa kuryente, sir. Sa kuryente. Kasi sa huli naman, yung nasa bill natin yan eh.
Hindi, sa kuryente kasi ganito yan. Ang problema kasi, hindi naman lahat nuclear eh. But kung hahaluan mo nuclear mix ng mas mura, kasi, okay, I'll give you one example. I visited the Prisco nuclear plant, the Philippine, yung twin sister ng BNPP doon sa Slovenia. The generation cost of that plant, when I visited, is 1/10 that of the Philippine cost. 1/10. Of course, they will add something more. To give you an idea, in Korea, for example, their price is about 50% less than the Philippines. But it's not just the price per kilowatt hour, kasi yung mayayaman, madaling magbayad. Ganito po, there was a survey 2 years ago, 79% of the Filipinos favored nuclear. So palagi ko bakit? Ganito, the median Filipino family, may isang ref yan, walang aircon, pays more than 1,000 per month sa kuryente. Kung tinitake home niya 10 to 15,000, that's 10% of the take-home pay for electricity. That is oppressive. And that's the reason. If you ask your relatives abroad, especially in America, magkano binabayad sa kuryente? Less than 1%. I live in the US for 11 years. I was not minding my electric bill. Iyan po yung dahilan dyan eh. Mura ang nuclear.
habol ko lang, meron lang isang argument against nuclear power. And ang tanong dyan where are you going to store the nuclear waste? Kasi I've toured nuclear plants in South Korea and India. I asked the same question, pati sa mga friends, tinanong ko na yan Wala silang nasagot, hindi nila alam kung saan dadalhin yung nuclear waste.
Ma'am, very good question and valid, ang tawag yan, valid criticism. Kasi, ganito yan. Fortunately, that's my specialty. I mean, I'm a geologist and I've been studying that for 10 years. Yan lang po ang expert. Kaya ako nakaupo dito, yung nuclear waste. So how, let's say, we start a nuclear program. Ang sasabihin ko kay Presidente, whoever she is, no? Na kung sinong maging presidente, this is my plan for the nuclear waste disposal. Geologic disposal, you bury it very deep. And we have the technology now because we have geothermal energy. We are number 2 in the world. We drill very deep boreholes, 2 to 3 kilometer boreholes. So ang gagawin ko, take an isolated island, drill the boreholes there, and you can flatten it, put the waste there and plug it with bentonite. It's as if it didn't exist. And I'm willing to live in that island. That technology is tested and testable. Importante po kasi if you go nuclear, we already tackle the nuclear waste in the beginning, not in the middle or in the end.
It will not go into the groundwater, for example. As bagay, it's too
No,
deep.
no way. Because the bentonite will prevent that from doing that.
Baka dapat i-secret place yun kasi, I mean, you're always up against the NIMBY phenomenon, no? Not in a backyard. Yeah.
Actually, maganda yan. Kung may island ka, mag-charge ka for putting the waste. Yayaman yung islang yan. Kaya nga ako, I'm willing to live there. I will invest. Kasi, i-charge mo sila for every, yun ang yan po. Ang problema lang po kasi, like in ibang countries, no, sa Amerika, kasi, or in Europe, siksikan sila. Pag maglalagay ka ng nuclear waste, may community sa taas, so kakabahan sila kahit na paano. But the technology is there. In France, they will put it, ma'am, in under deep tunnels in clay. The clay shields the nuclear materials from traveling. That's well established. The only existing nuclear repository na construction ay sa ngayon ay nasa Finland gagawin nila. By the way, may giyera ngayon sa US and Ukraine. Nag-meeting po ang IAEA. Yeah, if you bomb a nuclear plant, that is immediately a huge war crime. Kaya nag-meet agad ang IAEA kasi nakuha na nga ni Russia yung isang nuclear power plant at saka yung Chernobyl. Isa pa po yan, we are not doing this alone. We will be doing it with the IAEA. They inspect us. By the way, speaking of nuclear materials, 100 meters from where I am, right here, I'm still in my office, we have nuclear fuel because we have the reactor. It's been here for more than 50 years. Alam niyo po yung itlog na dinadaanan niyo dati?
Buhay pa po, hindi na nakikita kasi nakikita sa Commonwealth
Kita yun no?
Para ng techno-hub at saka ng mga puno. Nandyan pa rin po yung nuclear fuel.
Kaya pala sir, glowing na glowing kayo ngayon Hindi lang wala.
Okay. Well, anyway, Dr. Arcilia, we'll have to bring you back. Fascinating stuff. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Maraming salamat po, Dr. Arcilia.
Thank you for your excellent
question. Sir.
And thank you, Tigong, for signing that. Whether I disagree with you on some matters, but thank you for signing that.
Sarap ng tawa nila.
Dr. Carlo Arcilia, Director of the Philippine Nuclear Research Institute. Maraming salamat. And that's all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao and we are One News.